Hi, this is the Bitcoin morning brief, not cheddar right now. And we have Tone streaming from the New York Stock Exchange, and we have Giacomo from Italy. I don't think he's on the stock exchange today unless he's hiding in the background. And Tone, I guess Giacomo and I had a question. Are you Wall Street or are you Bitcoin?
Oh, no, I'm definitely more Bitcoin now. I really wanted to stream this from right outside the New York Stock Exchange, but it started to rain. So because it started to rain, I had to find a place indoors, and so here I am. I'm about 2 blocks away from the New York Stock Exchange. Found a little place indoors, so that I really wanted to do it with the New York Stock Exchange as the backdrop.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I think streaming in the rain is not the best idea, but you were fantastic on Cheddar today. So I saw that you retweeted the link. Everybody should check it out. It was awesome. I guess last question to you before I obviously turn to Giacomo. Did you have fun?
Yeah, no, it was great. I've never been on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange before, so that was definitely pretty cool. Definitely enjoyed it. So I hope I didn't sound too bearish on the price of Bitcoin, but we'll see.
You'll get international trolls even more. Giacomo, how's it going?
It's going fine. Today I'm not in Switzerland. Today I'm in Italy because we're talking Italian news. So I want to tell you about the collapse from the inside. So I'm in Milan, and I'm not at the Italian stock exchange because it's not really meaningful in the big schemes of things.
Especially right now, but we will get to that for sure. All right, jumping in. Oh, okay. More finance news for you, Don. So the foreign exchange settlement provider CLS invests in blockchain consortium R3. Yeah. The big takeaway of the story is that CLS is massive. So they're a $5 trillion per day foreign exchange settlement provider for really all the biggest financial firms in the world. So to me, though, it seems like it's a story about this massive and powerful company throwing a bit of money to various blockchain things because $5 million is nothing to them. But in order to keep on the top of blockchain and also be part of this Marco Polo network. Tone, is this just another story about blockchain buzz or is there something special here?
Well, that's the thing. It looks like Reuters didn't get the memo that, I didn't get the memo that R3 is no longer R3Cev and they're now R3. So I missed that memo. I still thought they were R3Cev as the name of their company. Um, now, Reuters didn't get the memo that R3 is no longer a blockchain company. So R3 had removed all mentions of the word blockchain from their entire website, and they're just a distributed ledger, this distributed database technology now, and they're basically Ripple without the scam token. So while I don't really, I'm not sure what this means. It just means that oh, the website really still says blockchain. That's interesting.
Are you
Uh,
ready?
yeah, let me see. I guess it's back. Again, so R3 was under the radar for so long. Uh, no, okay, so Giacomo, you remember this nonsense, right? Like they were
I do.
calling
I do.
they were
There.
calling themselves a blockchain.
But then
People,
DLT.
people, people like me were giving them so much shit over it. It was more so, Krista Rose and Junta for Bitcoin Uncensored, but they got so much shit for calling themselves a blockchain. They then removed all remnants of the word blockchain. They then got
They
angry at people that were still, referencing old versions of their website that still had the word blockchain. Then they
Yeah.
disappear for 9 months, and now the word blockchain is back. What the hell?
I distinctly remember. Not only they removed any mention of blockchain from the website, but they published an article, a blog post by Router about the fact that they are not doing blockchain because they are so better than blockchain. Which, in a way, for their use case, is something that I agree on. And then people started to mock them because there were still blockchain part remaining in the website and on the Twitter handler. So the Twitter handler, or R3Cev, was like blockchain for business, tweeting an article in which they were saying we never did blockchain. So basically, what's happening? They want to use proof of hype as always. So they want to use all the hype generated by Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and disruption by this sector, while on the same time they want to target a market that any honest and technical literal guy knows it has nothing to do or to gain from a direct use of the blockchain technology, except maybe for some time stamping, trivial time stamping function. So basically, they are starting to go on and off with the blockchain term. Actually, it's interesting that
sorry, and the name of their company, right? Like again, I thought these things they no longer existed. Like I haven't heard of anything related to R3 in over 6 months. I mean, we've picked up so many new users, and now these users are going to think that we're confused. But I remember this company as R3. Then they changed their name to R3Cev and removed all remnants of blockchain. Now they're going back to naming themselves R3 and bringing blockchain back. Like, what the hell? Like now we look like we're not up to date with this nonsense.
But because it's difficult to be up to date with everything separate to this company. Like so, at the beginning they were targeting banks, so they gather a consortium of 42 banks. Then they expanded the consortiums, but in order to not scam directly the first banks, they created a side consortium for other banks. Then they started to bleed out banks because all the major banks started to quit from the consortium. So they started to appeal to regulators. So the news were like, R3Cev is not anymore for banks, but for central banks and IRS and regulators, and then stock exchanges, and now apparently Forex groups. And yeah, and they removed the Cev. So it was a pun on receive, R3Cev, but now it's not anymore. But they are still receiving money in order to pump this.
I will. Sorry. Go ahead, Leah.
I will just jump in and be the naive one for sure. I spent a lot of time this morning trying to understand R3, like from Crunchbase to their website. I tried to understand it, and that was the first thing I said to Tone when he jumped on, is that I do not understand R3. Exactly to your point. When you look at even their Twitter handle, then they took off, DLT and blockchain, and then you have the blockchain-based trade finance, and then their website says only blockchain. But then they did keep talking about how that controversy that they weren't a blockchain and that only DLT and about Corda. I couldn't figure it out this morning, actually.
Look, see, the R3's problem is they don't have a scam token to make the money. So they're running into the same problem that every other ICO is running into. How do you make money in this space when you're not printing your own securities? Now, I'll give R3 this, that because they don't have a token, it's hard to call them a scam. But what they're trying to provide is they're trying to convince all of these banks that the databases that they're using, which is mostly, what do you call them? Oh yeah, the name came out of my head.
Marco Polo?
No, the main database provider for all of these banks.
Corda.
No, that's what they're
the
building.
traditional, the legacy one.
Yeah. It's shoot, we weren't using it at my financial company. We were using MS SQL, and we were using this thing called Sybase, for God's sakes. But oh my God. I forgot the main SQL company. I don't know. Just it's been a long day for me. I've been up since 5.
You mean Oracle or Microsoft?
Oracle, thank you. Oracle. That's what I couldn't get into my head. But yes, thank you. The live chat is reminding me Oracle. So they're just trying to convince all of these financial institutions that they can replace Oracle with a better database that will link cross banks. Now they are financed reasonably well, but they're not financed as well as Ripple to the tune of $58 billion, right? So it's so this is one of their problems.
Right. And just to end on the Reuters story was interesting. It was talking about all these very interesting and CLS, huge companies that are joining, but also a bunch of banks, JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, who have dropped off. So, it's it was a little hard to decipher even beyond what R3 is really up to. Again, when you kind of look at the news, a lot of it is about this Marco Polo initiative network. And so potentially they're making revenue streams off of kind of a subscription model to join that network. But
I will say that the entire crypto space outside of Bitcoin is a giant game of Marco Polo. Everyone's trying to find a use case.
True. True. All right. Well, let's go to Brazil. So crypto exchange, so Houbi confirms move to the Brazilian market. So simply put, Houbi is setting up shop in Sao Paulo. To note, if everyone remembers, actually their headquarters is now in Singapore. And they poached a heavy hitter from OKEX, which was competitor. So they've been doing some stuff, some shakeups. In my eyes, this story is just that they're setting up shop, but they're also setting up shop all over the world. Brazil seems to be the latest. So, this is what this Chinese firm, though, is doing kind of, and China is doing all over the world. And, it's kind of typical. But so I see this really, again, just my perspective, as a story of this group, Houbi, reaching out into global markets, setting up these shops. And the last paragraph even says that they've registered with FinCEN in the United States, as well as they're in early stages with the Canadian market and probably loads of other countries that we don't even know about. But yeah, so I'll just start it off there. Giacomo, what do you think about this expansion?
It's interesting. It looks like for Bitcoin crypto exchanges, Latin America is the new Asia, basically. So Puerto Rico and so a lot of Central America initiatives, and now Brazil. In a way, Latin America is already an interesting experiment in cryptocurrencies use, because we have Argentina and Venezuela, where there are very active Bitcoin communities. Even there is a very active attempt to censor Bitcoin experiment by the authorities. And now we also have some countries, little countries in Central America, and now big countries where apparently they are trying to, this is the good things about global business anti-fragility. If they shut you down in one place, you open up in another place that will have a competitive advantage. So you will create a competition in order to try to open up the system to your business, which it could be a dodgy business or a sensitive business. So that's the same for gambling, for anything else, and now also for Bitcoin exchange. Of course, there are the little islands. So there is Malta and Man Island and all that jazz. In this case, Brazil is, it was, I wasn't aware of any precedent buzz about Brazil openness to crypto industry, let's call it like that. But it's potentially interesting.
Yeah, Tone, what was your take?
There isn't, like you're right, Giacomo, there isn't any kind of precedent in Brazil. And I've communicated with a few people out of Brazil when I was down at the Latin American Bitcoin conference in Colombia. And basically, Brazil has very, very loose money laundering laws. And they're utilizing the fact that they're very, very loose to their advantage. But once again, just like there is this giant game of Marco Polo being played by people covering their eyes looking for a blockchain use case, it's almost the same thing here with jurisdictions, where you keep moving your centralized operation to provide decentralized applications. And then the moment too many of these centralized entities move into one place, that place immediately is going to say, whoa, what the hell is this? We don't want all of you people doing all of your decentralized stuff here. Here comes regulations, and they got to move again, right? So like the best way to ruin the financial freedoms of the Isle of Man is for all of these crypto companies to move there. The best way for Malta to be the strictest financial AML regulatory island is for all of these crypto companies to move there, because that's what's going to happen. If Puerto Rico was great if you don't want to pay taxes, but if like the 300 richest Americans suddenly move to Puerto Rico, they'll probably change the law to make it the most taxed region in America. Like these things only work in micro levels until too many people are using them. After that, the laws change, right? Because laws are dynamic. They can change on a single politician's whim. And people in crypto still haven't realized that Bitcoin is the only decentralized thing that we have. And the more decentralized you are, the better off your project is going to be. Now, that's my general takeaway. Now, the thing that I loved about the article, Leah, if you can read the first sentence of paragraph 3, that would be awesome.
Yeah, actually, I was laughing at that too. So the report further suggests that Houbi has set up an office in a co-working space. I looked it up. It's WeWork in the country's capital, Sao Paulo, and
Yeah,
also
you can stop there.
Yeah, it's WeWork actually.
Well, no. Come on, CoinDesk. Come on. The capital of Brazil is Sao Paulo. Like, I've never even been to Brazil, and I know that's not the capital. If you're gonna if you're gonna screw up on the capital, at least screw up like everybody else screws up and say Rio de Janeiro is the capital, right? Which it isn't. But come on, guys. We wanna really like. We cover way too many CoinDesk articles. You guys can't do that. But yeah, that made me laugh this morning. I'm look, I screw up as much as the next guy, but like CoinDesk, your respected publications. So this is an easy Google to double check. Come on, I have to make fun of you for that one.
So just a very quick comment about what Tom said. I think it's extremely important, the distinction Tom made between the legal anti-fragility of centralized businesses and the legal anti-fragility of the centralized stuff like Bitcoin. So in the first case, I mean, it is true that moving your legal entity jurisdiction, you can escape or dodge or minimize the impact or arbitrage the impact of laws or regulation for some time. That's completely true, but that's an unstable equilibrium that usually goes to reduce himself, and it cannot scale up. When you start to be big, they will come for you, and eventually the US will normalize the legal situation all around the world, just as it happened with KYC, AML, bearer instruments, and all the stuff like that. So it's the same. This is the old way to try to be legally resilient, to try to decentralize geographically a centralized legal entity. This is what eGold tried to do in Central America, Liberty Reserve, and they all did finish up in jail or not operative anymore. So the difference between this approach, which can work for some time, maybe even few years, and maybe make billions to the owners, but eventually it's like a continuous game of Marco Polo, and eventually they shut everything down. While stuff like BitTorrent or Bitcoin or Tor or the internet itself, the more they get big, the more they scale, the harder is to shut them down. This kind of approach.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Opposite. In this case, the bigger you are, the easiest it is to shut you down.
Right. Look at Bitfinex. I mean, the Bitfinex is in the news, and not always very well, because they've been hacked twice. They've grown kind of big. They got this tether hump stuck to their back, and they're going to be on the radar of a lot of these regulators. Ethereum, same thing, right? Like, Ethereum has grown way too big, and it's now going to be on the forefront of future legislation on ICOs. At least I'm expecting it to be. Like, and this is what a lot of these altcoins just don't understand. What happens when you create an altcoin, even one that was, let's say, legit, like a Charlie Lee, like some of the other ones, you're still the face of an altcoin, and the more that altcoin succeeds, the more dangerous it is for the original creators if they're visible, which is one of the reasons why Satoshi isn't. Like, no one understands that, why he never wanted to show his face, because he knew what he was doing would get him into serious trouble, whether legally or, potentially life-threatening. And none of these other guys understand that, and they're still trying to pump their alternative to Bitcoin. Now, they're not going to succeed, But if they do succeed, they're gonna end up like Ross Ulbricht, only worse.
Yeah, and to add to what you guys are saying, and to make it Brazil specific, but also greater, I was involved with Brazil with the World Bank a little bit, and the informal economy is absolutely massive, right? Specifically in Brazil, I think I remember when I was there in 2014, it was like 16% of the country's GDP was in the informal economy, and that always and typically is, especially if you want to look at India as another example, excessive bureaucracy and corruption, right? And so they're going to want their money from this. So to your point as well, that, if it gets larger, or even right now, they don't know what they're doing. Most countries don't, but some countries are, the United States is trying. We talk about other countries in the world starting to form regulations, but they're going to want to go after it. And, again, this is because they had to drop in exports. They have a massive Gini coefficient, which, it's a nation though, which is interesting, is also like, it's really a nation of lower and working class income people who obviously don't have brokers, who I think, probably have heard about everybody getting rich off Bitcoin, and it could introduce a whole new class of people trying to invest. To your point, Giacomo, is that, or Tone, I think, is that specifically, though correct, Brazil also in the crypto space, albeit quite small, it's been very much in the shadow economy of, the new form of hiding your money under mattresses. And the government's very much aware of that, and then has made a couple statements about it. But, back to it, because of all these reasons, I do think to this story, and specifically the economic inequities, that Houbi is actually going to have quite difficulties making this work in Brazil. So we'll see. But, I think it comes down to the fact that, the corruption in this country is insane. And it's going to lead into our next story of your country right now. But I think the government's going to want a piece, and we'll see how this works out. They don't have their regs sorted out yet, not even for their normal banking system. So, but that's my take. Woohoo! Actually, not woohoo, but it's to Giacomo. Crypto is making a comeback as Italy's political crisis mounts. Giacomo, what's going on in Italy, and what do you think about the author making this correlation?
So I will describe a little bit what's going on in Italy. I'm not sure about the correlation. I mean, cryptocurrencies, the Bitcoin price and the derivative price of the shit coins is going up and down all the time. And some news are triggers, but mostly it's just the market moving. So I'm not so sure. Maybe it's just a trigger, but because I don't think that enough part of the market understands Bitcoin good enough to really perceive it as a lifeboat in case of a massive collapse of the Italian situation. Well, it is, of course. So what's happening here? Basically, in Italy, you have the president of the republic, which is something like the king in monarchies. So he doesn't have direct administrative powers. He is elected by the parliament every 7 years, and then he is the one appointing the government, and then the government has to ask the approval of the parliament, which is itself elected every 5 years. So it's not synchronized. So basically, it's like the president of a board of shareholders appointing the board of the company, including the CEO, and then asking all the shareholder to vote yes or no to his appointment. Usually, what the president of the republic does is to ask to the parliament what is the consensus about the possible board with prime minister and all the ministers, and then he gets the consensus, then he proposes, and then the parliament, of course, says yes, because he formulated the proposal based on the political situation. In this specific case, he did Mattarella, so the new president of the republic, he did that, but the result was something with a lot of anti-euro minister proposals. So the proposed minister of the economy is a guy who would like to have Italy leaving the Eurozone, which is something, with huge implication for the Eurozone itself. He collected information. He received the proposal of the government, and for the first time in the history of the country, he refused to submit to the parliament the proposal that he received, because the prospect of a explicitly anti-euro government was scary for many European level commentators and, of course, hierarchies and interests. So now we are at this. Not we. They are at the stale. I'm a Switzerland citizen, but they are in a stale situation, and this is actually, so far, from a purely micro point of view, this is actually good, because it means that they are not making new laws, and usually when they do make new laws, the new laws are always worse than the previous ones. This was a constant with very, very few counterexamples. So no new laws. The government continues to destroy the economy. The total tax rate in Italy is close to 68%, not the fiscal pressure, the total tax rate. So it's basically hell. It's a place made to destroy every business. And bureaucracy is incredible, slow, inefficient, inconsistent. Laws are self-contradictory. So it's basically impossible to do serious business here, unless it's just chronic capitalist business with a strong relationship with the Italian government. So the situation is bad. Without the government, it's not going to get better, but at least it's not going to get seriously worse either. So it can go on this way for a long time. What will happen is that some automatic mechanism like VAT increase will arrive automatically if they don't find. But I mean, yeah, they will raise the VAT to 25%. But if they weren't going to do that, they were going to rise some other kind of taxation anyway. So far the indicators of risk of the country are very high, because the only way the Italian government is solvent in the long run with its debt is that they do serious reforms, cutting down the deficit spending, cutting down the spending, selling some government property in order to cover some government debt, liberalizing the market, trying to have a free market to stimulate growth. So some guys, some European technocrat still think that they can try to force Italy to do this kind of reforms, but it's probably wishful thinking. And so far that there is not a government that is willing to do these reforms, the risk of the country for default is just going to be bigger and bigger. The problem is that Italy is not Greece. You cannot bail out Italy just like they did with Greece. Italy's the hole created by an Italian default will be massive, and probably it will be the trigger of a strong domino effect. So it could be an apocalypse. And I'm smiling because, you know, all Bitcoiners are a little bit survivalist, apocalypse friendly guys. And but of course it will be also a lot of suffering and bad things. So the situation is this one: stale, with very, very unstable fundamentals, not a specific trigger, nothing. I don't see anything that can happen in this day that can seriously collapse the situation one way or the other, actually. The only thing that could happen is that a major bank have some kind of bankrupt, like Monte dei Paschi di Siena had several times during the absence of a government that can bail it out. So if this happened, this could be maybe a major trigger. The interesting thing, and then I cut it down because I'm going too long. The interesting thing is that while in 2011, 2012, the spread of the interest rate of Italian debt against German debt was very, very high, and everybody was scared. You could hear in the radio station, in newspaper, like, please do something fast, cut spending, cut debt. We are in very bad shape. We have to do something. Right now, all the fundamentals are actually the same, if not worse, than 2011, 2012. But the mood that you can feel around is not the same. It's like, I mean, we didn't collapse the other time. We were probably not. I mean, Mario Draghi will just print money like, like an ICO guy, and he will just do an LTRO or a quantitative easing, and he will just solve everything printing money like the other time. So there is this kind of, unawareness, if that's the word, about the potential for collapse.
Yeah, it also does help when Mario Draghi is an Italian at the head of the European money printing machine. So it's
it does. Super Mario Bros.
I'm totally going to nerd out on what you just said, Giacomo, and also because I used to work in fixed income investing. So absolutely, especially your points on bonds. I mean, the markets went nuts. I'm going to be excited to ask Tone not just about Bitcoin, but also just the rest. But yeah, I mean, Italy is the third largest bond market in the entire world. It's massive. I hope everyone understands that point. It is very, very, very important. It's not a Greece 2.0. It's a different animal. And we have a really massive problem with Italy potentially. And if they've got this much debt, someone's on the other side of that, right? And it's an asset to them. But if Italy can't pay back their debts, then all these banks worldwide, including central banks, the asset isn't really there. Therefore, like the short-term rates on Italy, right, went from a negative number just 3 months ago on interest rate up to 3% in an entire week, right? In the United States, it's taken us like 3.5 years to raise interest rates to that kind of level. So bondholders are dumping their bonds and demanding higher and higher rates in order to lend the money back to Italy. At some point, this could trigger similar things in Spain, in Portugal, maybe back in Greece. I mean, it's actually, it's not just monetary, it is political, which is why I really, really wanted, and I think Tone, me, and you wanted to cover this story. Because if they can't get their act together politically, then no one's going to be in charge to solve the monetary. So now everybody's kind of in fire, right? And the NASDAQ and the Dow in Europe, and it could be a huge story, or it could turn out actually to not be a huge story, which is my turnover to you, Tone, because you always said that news follows price and not the other way around. But, and furthering, because it's very nuanced, you've been talking about how news affects bulls and bear markets differently. So to this piece, if you want to talk about this piece specifically, what do you think about if Bitcoin is correlated to this, as well as if you wanted to talk about traditional markets? Curious about your thoughts.
I mean, Bitcoin will be correlated to this. I mean, this thing with Italy, it'll probably get dragged out into September, October. Now, as I guess the world knows, September and October are very famous for traditional stock market crashes in general. They tend to occur September, October, and they tend to be very, very bad, so that they actually bottom in October. So stock crashes usually begin after the summer in September. They usually end in October, but because October is usually the capitulation time, a lot of people also see October as being a big crash day. So I haven't paid enough close attention to the financial things in Italy. I was very up to speed on all economics back in 2011, and I thought that Europe was going to collapse then. Clearly, I was wrong, along with a lot of other people. And I've been bullish on the general markets. Now, this time it's the bond market, and the bond market is absolutely massive. So it's hard to predict its effects on Bitcoin. It's hard to predict its effects on the stock market as well. Like, as these government bonds collapse, people run away from these bonds, they sell them, but what do they do with the money? That money has to go somewhere, and I'm expecting that money to go into stocks. Now, even though the Italian government bond market is going to collapse, there are some decent Italian companies out there that export globally. I don't know, Ferrari's still Italian. Maybe their stock would go through the roof, so you don't know about what's going to happen to the money once it starts leaving the bond market. Now, a lot of it is going to evaporate because people aren't going to be able to sell fast enough. But those that do sell, they have to put that money somewhere. Maybe some of that money is going to go into Bitcoin. Now, if this Italian news was happening during a Bitcoin bull market or during a Bitcoin, bottoming out process, the way the Greece crisis hit us at in the summer of 2015, after Bitcoin had already bottomed in January, something like that would have helped a lot. But people continue to associate news with the price of Bitcoin. Reading this article, it actually jogged my memory. Let me see if I can find that article. There it is, Leah. The Bitcoin rallies close to 10,000. Can you just read that one?
Bitcoin rallied close to 10,000 soon after the close of tax season in the United States, but is down by more than 2,000 since the beginning of May.
Right. So remember, I totally forgot about this. Remember all of the crazies that were saying how the end of tax season, like the moment April 17th, which was the tax day in America, that's when everyone is going to get their either tax refunds and go back into Bitcoin, or that's when people will stop selling Bitcoin to pay their tax bills. All of that was just nonsense. People were just like adding, like putting their view of the news onto the price of Bitcoin. And yeah, Bitcoin rallied to 10,000 the rest of that month, basically on speculators believing the nonsense that this tax day had something to do with the price of Bitcoin. And then what did Bitcoin do? It fell 30% from 10,000 down to 7,000 a couple of days ago, right? Back to the area that was even lower than what people were talking about during this time. So again, people just like to associate news to the price. We're in a bear market. If this Italian, panic drags out into the summer, giving Bitcoin a chance to bottom, it can certainly fuel it, but it's not going to come from Italy. This is another thing I kept talking about during the Greece crisis. The buying of Bitcoin is not going to come from Italy. For most people in Italy, it is almost already too late. And a lot of people don't realize it until it is too late and your banks are closed. The buying is going to come from Spain. The buying is going to come from Portugal. It's going to come from France, and it's going to come from Germany. If the Italian crisis gets as bad as the Greek crisis did, and the banks are actually closed, it'll be too late for the Italians to get Bitcoin unless they all run over to Giacomo's co-working space to try and buy some Bitcoin over in Milan. But it will be too late for them. But people in Spain are going to look around and say, hey, this can happen here next month. I better go and buy some Bitcoin.
Right. So guys, a note of folklore and gossip about my Milan co-working space. When I say that there is a stale in the government because the President of the Republic refused to appoint the government, so all the quarrel was about the name of the proposed Ministry of the Economist and of the Finances. That was this Professor Savona. So Professor Savona is the president of a startup, Euclid, that started in my co-working Milan as a Bitcoin startup. So Euclid, right, like EUKLLID, was a Bitcoin startup, not really. It was more like a algorithmic trading startup that were trading Bitcoin against dollar and putting the trading signal in the blockchain with a timestamp. Then they pivoted away from Bitcoin completely, so our relationship completely closed. But this man, the man that the President of the Republic refused, the name that stopped the government from being formed is Savona, Professor Savona, which is the president of a former Bitcoin startup in Copernico Milan Blockchain Lab. That's very funny.
That is really interesting. Geez, you guys are scaring me on this one, actually. No, but yeah, Tone, just to your last point, right? I mean, it could be contagion, right? Bank runs in behavioral economics, it provides the herding behavioral tendency, right? Herding effect. And that's the tendency for an individual to mimic the actions of a larger group. And those actions are usually irrational. So yeah, if it's no small amount, so we're gonna have you follow this.
There's no tripods allowed. There's no what?
We may have lost Tone. So okay, I'll explain while he's
okay, all right,
talking to someone. So an emergency sale of Bitcoin just earned 14 million for German law enforcement. So the German authorities sold Bitcoin and other cryptos that they seized in a criminal investigation through an emergency sale. So it's interesting for me is that they didn't just sell it off, but they sold it off as an emergency sale, which is different. So they had the Bitcoin, Bcash, Bitcoin Gold, and Ether, and they were sitting on it. So the reason they sold it, I think, is that, is because the crypto markets have been wildly fluctuating since they first started holding it. It must have been, this is my hypothesis for Tone to disprove and Giacomo as well, that they came to the conclusion that the crypto market was so unpredictable that they didn't want to hold it anymore. And this is important to me because if that hypothesis is correct, then it can show lack of confidence and potentially more because it's Germany. But Tone, what did you think about the story?
Okay, so I'll comment on the story, but like I don't know if I was on mute or not. So there was ran into a regulation issue that immediately got resolved. So apparently the place that I was streaming at doesn't allow tripods. So to get around the regulation, I just had to take off my webcam from the tripod and put it on top of my computer.
Regulatory arbitrage. That's great.
Correct, yeah.
Tripods.
Right. Because that's the problem with this world, tripods. Right. So I found it interesting because, again, this kind of went under the radar, right? So everyone blamed the guy out of Japan, Kobayashi, for selling Bitcoin for Mt. Gox. This is actually a similar situation, but in a much smaller realm. It looks like they sold 1,300 Bitcoin, 1,400 Bcash, and a bunch of B Gold. I don't even know why they bothered, and a bunch of some Ethereum. And all of this was confiscated from yet another. It was confiscated from. I didn't realize that people paid this much money for copyrighted books. I thought BitTorrent had resolved this problem. But hey, more power to them if they decided to centralize and make it easier people to download copyrighted material. They got obviously popped for it. They confiscated a bunch of Bitcoin, and whoever was responsible for holding that Bitcoin, this was confiscated over a year ago. They watched it rise to $20,000 price of Bitcoin, which then they were watching fall, and they kind of panicked and they wanted the money, right? And this is what happens in a bear market. Again, guys, you have to realize that everyone is happy thinking it's going to go up forever. And then things start going down and you have no idea who is actually selling because there's enough people that are panicking. You can clearly see law enforcement in this case panicking and selling off a bunch of crypto, hence dropping the price some more. So everything you hear about all these institutions getting in, it's being negated by incidents like this that you don't hear about till after the fact, okay? That's one thing. Another thing that I found interesting in this article is how they're talking about cryptocurrency confiscations have become some of the most profitable things law enforcement have been doing, right? So what do you think that means rolling forward? That means they're going to be way more interested in cracking down on any operation where they can confiscate your crypto because it's a massive windfall for the departments that are, confiscating your stuff. So, I mean, if you are running some kind of a centralized operation that is storing Bitcoin, either your Bitcoin or Bitcoin on behalf of other people, please take on much better security so that the government doesn't get their hands on that Bitcoin. Because A, you're going to be enriching the government, which is the opposite of what you want to do with your Bitcoin operation. And B, the government's going to panic and sell in the worst possible moment, yet crashing the price some more. So nothing good happens when you have terrible Bitcoin security, even if you're doing something that the government doesn't like.
Giacomo, what did you think about the piece?
I completely agree with Tone. Really, this is this is the best slogan. People, if you're trying to do something that the government doesn't like, you do have to have a very good Bitcoin security. I think that there are two other interesting things when you have a Bitcoin say basically when the government is taking Bitcoin from this kind of illegal operation. The first one is that it's very difficult to be sure that the policemen, the specific cops and experts and security reviewer that will conduct the operation will not take some part of the Bitcoin for them. So fighting intergovernment corruption in these cases is incredibly difficult, as we have seen in the Silk Road episode with many FBI agents involved in the arrest of Ross Ulbricht. They basically stole the Bitcoin for them, part of the Bitcoins for themselves. So since it's trivial to do, and since the judges signing stuff and the top level of police, they don't understand anything of what they are reading in the reports, in the police reports. So it's super easy to obfuscate things. So it's interesting because it could create incentives not only for government to seize Bitcoin of illegal operations, but also for specific agents of the governments in order to be the first to put their hands on it, because they can try to keep part of it. They are human beings. They are not angels. And the second interesting thing is that maybe not very much in Germany, maybe more in US because of or in UK because of common law. But it's interesting when the government sells the Bitcoin that has been seized by an illegal operation, because when government crack down a drug dealing operation, they don't sell the heavy drugs. They just sell the cars of the drug dealers or the houses, the legal assets, not the illegal assets. So the fact that they are seizing this operation and selling the assets they seized on the open market or with auctions means that they are. This is a strong statement about the legal status of the cryptocurrencies they are selling. So this is not very interesting in Germany because it's a civil law, so they make another law changing this, and nobody cares what they did in the past. But in UK or Malta or US, if the US Marshal sold the Bitcoin of Silk Road, then it's very, very difficult for the American judge to say that Bitcoin is illegal in the future.
Interesting point.
Right. I'll add to that as well. And yeah, you are right, Giacomo. It will be a very interesting what happens when the government is selling these things as if they were legal assets. But I also found it funny in that article how they talked about, well, normally the government never sells assets ahead of schedule unless they're perishable, like what the hell is the government confiscating that's perishable? Like they mentioned like food and stuff. Like so this isn't normal. Like they really felt like Bitcoin was a perishable item, like it's going to go to zero, and they wanted to sell it, sooner than later. And again, this is how the market eventually bottoms, when the last person has panicked and sold. As long as these panicky holders are holding Bitcoin, the bear market is not going to end.
Absolutely. All right. Well, to that point, let's talk about this bear market. Tone, TA?
All right, let's do it. Well, once again, I want to point people's attention to the Bitcoin Live website. I felt very, very bad to turn down Bitcoin Live on the eve of registration day. I tried putting together a bunch of videos before the launch. I was not able to do so. I was going to be the weak link on this website because I felt that I was not going to be able to provide the content that I initially intended to provide them. And I want to continue focusing on this YouTube channel and as much free content as I possibly can. Now, that should not take away from the Bitcoin Live initiative. It's pretty good. I wish I had time to keep an eye on it myself, but definitely don't use me dropping out of that initiative to sway you away from the good content that's going to come out on Bitcoin Live. My trading website has not yet been migrated over to tonebase.com. That will come eventually. And let me hold on a second, guys. I want to move this out of the way. There we go. And my travel schedule for workshops still hasn't changed. I am off to Dublin, Ireland next week, and from there it's going to be London. After that, it's going to be Montreal and Berlin. So go ahead and check these guys out. All right, here come the markets. Let me move this over to there. Okay, so we've had a little bit of a pop. Now, from a weekly perspective, nothing has changed. I continue to equate the current week in the Bitcoin markets. This is the week of 5/28, our current week. I continue to assimilate that week with the week of, I believe, August something, this week, August 18th. Now, the reason I equate them the same is because the prior week, which in our case is last week, we had a big down week that closed below the 50-week moving average. This is why I'm equating the current week to the week after that, which you can see was a very volatile week and ended almost neutral, but slightly positive for the week. This week continues to shape out almost exactly like that, with a little bit less volatility. After that, the 2014 market had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consecutive bearish weeks in a row. So let's see what happens next week. Are we going to kick off, a 5 or a 6 week bear market now that we're below the 50-week period moving average? We will see. Now, when I move to the daily chart, it gets, actually the 12-hour chart will get more interesting, right? As I move to the daily chart, we are on a green 3 of 9, and we are looking at a, well, actually this countdown probably should have reset because, oh no, we're not below the setup trend line, so we're okay actually. We are on a 12 of 13, which is a weird 12 because it's going to close below the 9 and stuff. But in any case, if you're blindly trading the sequential indicator, you did have a 2 above a 1, and now you have a 3 above a 2. So there are reasons to think that we could have a bounce. How high can this bounce go? I'm thinking no higher than $8,000 based on the daily chart. If I look at some of the indicators, if I take a look at the CMF, you can see how it slowly continues to move to the downside. And while we are coming back to zero, we just made a lower low with a higher low in the price, which is not all that great in my opinion. The RSI got just to the oversold line and has started to tick up. Now, the interesting part is going to be on this 12-hour chart. On the 12-hour chart, I had drawn the symmetric triangle about a day or two ago. So there is a chance that the price of Bitcoin could actually start to go up. From here, I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to draw the arrow from down there. I'm going to draw the arrow from the current area. There is a chance that we can go into and hit the top of this triangle one more time. There is definitely a chance of that, but I think this would be major resistance. But this is totally possible, in which case I'm going to take this arrow and I'm going to draw it here. Oh, wait, not what I wanted to copy. So there is a chance that this is something that could happen. Now, things don't always play out perfectly. It's very likely we're going to stop a little bit below that. It's even less likely that we're going to overshoot it because a lot of these things don't work out. But the idea is pretty much the same. Now that we had a down day yesterday and we're back to the upside today, it means that this low could be a little longer. This low could hang around till, throughout next month. This does not change my opinion of the bear market going below 6,000, but it can delay it some more, right? Again, a bear market is both price and time. Like my price targets remain 5,000 as the most bullish target, as I explained on Chatter this morning, and 1,300 is the most bearish target. These targets are still in play. they're going to remain in play until I see Bitcoin go above $13,000. So the longer Bitcoin hangs around the $7,000, $8,000 area, all that it's really doing is delaying how long it takes to bottom. You really want to bottom as soon as possible so you can start going back up as Italy goes into a shit, as Italy goes into more and more trouble. I'm going to try and be clean here, right? As the Italian financial situation goes into more and more trouble, you want Bitcoin to have already purged all of these like German sales of coins and God knows what other countries, right? You want all of these panicky people to be out of the market so that Bitcoin can finally start to go up. And if that gets delayed, then the bear market might get delayed. But keep an eye on this. You could have a bull rally, but I do not expect this rally to go above the prior high. And the prior high was 10,000. If we go above 10,000, I can then start considering bullish long-term targets. But until I see that, I'm going to remain of the belief that the bear market is still with us. Here's a 4-hour chart. The 4-hour chart isn't really very helpful at the moment. I mean, you do have confirmation with the CMF that it's trading higher than the prior low, and the price is trading higher with the higher low. The OBV is the same. The RSI is rising. The MACD is rising. So everything is pretty strong. So I would say on a 4-hour chart, let me see what the price is, right? A break of 75, I would say can easily take us into 8,000. So I become, short-term bullish upon a breakout. Like if we get close to the vicinity of 8,000, I would consider that a bullish opportunity. But that bullish opportunity will probably be short-lived, and it might take you to as high as 8,000 if Bitcoin is even strong enough to do that. So we'll see. So there is some bullish opportunities right now, but only on very short time scales. That's about it for me. I'm not going to even look at the 1-hour chart. I don't think there's anything there. I mean, we are above everything involved in the cloud. But once again, I'm using the 4-hour chart and look for a breakout above 75 to take you to 8,000 is what I'm looking at short term. And then hopefully, I'll sell a little bit to pay the rest of my bills for the summer, something like that is my best advice for myself.
All right. Thank you so much, Tone. Are you going to head back to the trading floor and start screaming about Bitcoin a tiny bit more before heading out of Manhattan?
Yeah, no, I'm going to hang out in Manhattan for a while, get a couple of lunch meetings now that I'm here. And yeah, it was good. It was great being on the floor of the stock exchange. Really enjoyed it.
Felt good. Giacomo, what's going on in your world before we sign out?
Still no news. So even from your live reporter here in Italy, there is still no sign of imminent collapse. So let's wait out.
I guess we will. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Tone, any last news from you? I think you're traveling soon.
Yeah, I'm traveling soon. I'll keep you guys posted on that. But for now, thank you for watching, guys, and good luck with your trades.
Goodbye, everybody.